Take a quick pause. Did you know that over 90% of you watching haven't hit the subscribe button yet? If you're enjoying this video, take a second to subscribe and hit the like button. It helps us bring you more gripping stories every day. Also, we'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop your city in the comments so we can see how far our stories are reaching. Your support really keeps us going. Now, let's jump back into the video. I was the kind of man people trusted, or at least that's what they believed. Late that Friday night, I sat in my office under the sterile glow of fluorescent lights, the only source of illumination in the otherwise quiet building. My office was tidy, the kind of orderly that came not from a love of cleanliness, but from a need to control. My fingers tapped lightly against the armrest as I stared at the framed photo on my desk. A moment in time, my wife, 3 children, and I, smiling at some beachside park like we were plucked straight from a catalog. Anyone walking in would have assumed I was a proud father, a devoted husband. The truth, however, was far murkier. That day, I had spent hours combing through resumes to replace 2 office staffers who left following their husbands' promotions. On paper, it was a typical HR rotation, but in reality, I was finding unusual satisfaction in controlling these small shifts in people's lives. There was something addictive about quietly nudging the trajectory of others, rearranging the pieces of their futures without them ever knowing. "Ed," came a soft voice as my assistant Kathy knocked gently on the door, snapping me out of my thoughts. "All 8 candidates confirmed their interviews for Monday morning. Anything else you need before I head out?" I looked up and offered her the smile I reserved for moments like these. Warm, reassuring, almost paternal. It was the kind of smile that lowered defenses, the kind I'd mastered over the years. "No, that's all for now, Kathy." "Thanks. Get home safe." She nodded, visibly relieved, as though my presence made her skin itch and she couldn't wait to escape it. I didn't take offense. That reaction was typical. People always sensed something, but never quite put their finger on it. After she left, I leaned back and exhaled. My schedule every Thursday and Friday was predictable. I'd drive out to different states in my region, visit a few sales reps, shake hands, smile for photos, and then drive back by Friday evening. Those few hours on the road gave me something rare, a pocket of solitude. Grace, my wife, used that time to have her weekly girls' night tradition. For the last 15 years, we both enjoyed our version of freedom. Ours was a well-oiled machine, a life built on rhythms, routines, and unspoken agreements. We both had our roles, our little escapes, and we never questioned the arrangement. At least, not out loud. Grace worked as an executive assistant at the district attorney's office, though she'd soon be stepping into a federal position. She was sharp, polished, always knew how to carry herself. In the early days of our marriage, her confidence made me feel like I'd won the lottery. But 2 decades in, that admiration had worn thin. I stopped seeing her as the goddess she once was and began seeing her as another element in a system I could manipulate. When her parents began taking our 3 kids every other weekend under the guise of giving us reconnection time, I didn't object. Grace played along like it was a chance to rekindle our romance. I let her believe it, but truthfully, I liked having that extra time to operate in my own little world. That Friday night, when I finally arrived home, Grace was in the kitchen. Her golden hair was pulled back, and she wore one of those silk blouses that probably cost more than I earned in a week back in college. She was sipping tea, her body language stiff, unreadable. "You finished with those resumes?" she asked without looking at me. I watched her closely, noting the lack of warmth in her tone. "Yeah," I replied. "Monday is going to be packed." She nodded, indifferent. For a moment, we just stood there, the silence stretching between us like an old wound neither of us wanted to reopen. Then she said something that made my ears perk up. "We really need someone reliable this time. The wrong people can ruin the office morale." There it was again. Control. Grace and I might have had different arenas, but we both played the same game. She managed people with the same cold efficiency that I did, which made me wonder if she was capable of playing me as well. The memory of the previous weekend floated back. Grace had organized a family trip to Nashville, part of her occasional efforts to maintain our image. On the way back, we stopped at one of those quirky, overhyped restaurants known for throwing bread rolls at customers. The kids were thrilled. I was less so. Overpriced food, claustrophobic booths, and too many strangers laughing too loudly. In the car, as the kids dozed off in the back seat, Grace turned off the music. That was her signal. She wanted a serious conversation. I'd been anticipating it. I reached into my jacket and tapped the small voice recorder I kept on me. It had become a habit. After all, when your instincts tell you people are playing you, you learn to keep your own record. "What's on your mind?" I asked, keeping my tone light. She didn't look at me. "Have you ever thought about having an affair?" she asked, voice neutral. I didn't flinch. Instead, I played dumb. "What kind of question is that?" She shrugged slightly. "People get bored. Sometimes exploring something else brings clarity." I looked straight ahead. That statement, it wasn't a question, it was a dare. "I haven't," I said. "I still believe in loyalty. Call me old-fashioned." That line was loaded. I wanted her to feel inferior, petty even, and I saw the way her grip on the steering wheel tightened. "I think you should," she muttered, "if it makes you happy." I smiled, slow and deliberate. "And you'd be fine with that?" She didn't answer. We rode the rest of the way in silence. My mind was spinning. That conversation didn't come from nowhere. Grace was laying groundwork. But for what? Back home, my parents had brought the kids back. As I got out of the car, my father approached me quietly. "Ed," he murmured, "we need to talk. Something about Grace and April." April was our youngest. She had Grace's eyes, my stubbornness, and a love of reading that none of the other kids inherited. Something in my father's tone twisted my stomach. "Come to the office tomorrow," I said, loud enough for Grace to hear. "You can help fix that drawer or whatever." Grace, who stood in the doorway with her arms crossed, narrowed her eyes at me. "Running errands tomorrow?" I offered a cheerful grin. "Dad needs help with something small. I'll be back before dinner." She said nothing, just stepped aside to let me in. But I felt it. The tension had thickened. Something was unraveling. The next morning, I met my parents at the office. Kathy brought coffee and locked the door behind her. My father sat down across from me and ran his hand through his graying hair. "You remember those ancestry kits we did as a joke?" he asked. I nodded. He swallowed hard. "April's came back with a match. A woman named Beatrice. She says she's April's grandmother." I went still. "What?" "She gave up her son for adoption when she was a teenager. According to the results, her son is April's biological father." I stared at him, my pulse thundering in my ears. "I want to talk to her," I said. "Right now." I dialed the number. When she picked up, her voice was raspy, tired. "This is Beatrice Smith." "Ma'am," I began, "my name is Edward Adams. I was told you found a genetic match with my daughter, April." "Yes," she said quietly. "My son's name was Luke Barrow. I've been trying to find his daughter before I pass. I have stage 4 cancer." I nearly dropped the phone. Luke Barrow, the district attorney, Grace's boss. I kept my voice calm. "We can arrange something. Maybe my parents can bring April to visit." She thanked me, then asked for documentation to arrange the DNA test. There was mention of an inheritance, a large one. After I hung up, I didn't move. "Grace," I whispered, "you didn't just cheat. You brought his child into my home." Outside the office, I handed the recorder to Kathy. "Transcribe it. Make copies. This stays between us." She nodded, her face pale. I had the beginning of a plan. I knew Grace was careful, but I was going to be patient, strategic, lethal in my precision. I pulled David, my assistant manager, and his wife, Cheryl, into the loop. Cheryl knew Grace from way back. She wasn't fond of her. "I think she's been with Luke for years," and I told them. "Maybe even since April was conceived." David blinked. "Light? Are you sure?" "She wants me to cheat," I said. "She wants grounds for divorce to make herself the victim." Cheryl leaned in. "You want us to help you catch her?" "I want proof. I want to destroy the mask she hides behind." And I would. Not with violence, not with rage, but with silence, evidence, and surgical precision. I would make sure Grace didn't just lose everything. She'd watch it all slip through her fingers while thinking she was in control. She was smart, but I was smarter. And now the game had begun. It was after midnight when I finally returned home. The house was dark, save for the faint glow from a hallway nightlight. Grace had gone to bed long before I walked through the door, and the silence in our home felt colder than usual. I stood in the foyer for a moment, listening. No sounds from the bedroom, no TV murmuring in the background. Nothing. I crept upstairs like a stranger in my own home. When I opened the bedroom door, the moonlight from the window cast Grace in soft silver. Her back was to me, the curve of her shoulder barely rising with each breath. It would have looked peaceful to anyone else, but I could see the faint tension in her posture. The stillness was too rigid, too controlled. She was awake. I quietly undressed and slipped into bed beside her, leaving just enough space to make a statement. She didn't speak, and neither did I. Instead, I'd lay there staring at the ceiling, heart pounding with the weight of everything I now knew. I wasn't angry, not in the way most people would expect. What I felt was deeper, sharper. I had been betrayed by the one person I had always suspected might be capable of it, and now that suspicion had bloomed into certainty. By morning, she acted as though nothing had happened. She moved about the kitchen with forced grace, preparing breakfast for the kids and talking to them like any other Saturday. I played my role too, smiling at Eric's talk about football, nodding at Amy's plans with her friends, complimenting April on her painting project. But beneath the calm, I was calculating every step. Grace poured me coffee without asking. I sipped it slowly, watching her as she avoided direct eye contact. "I'll be taking April out for a bit today," I said casually. "Dad wants to show her some old family property up north." Grace paused for half a second. "Oh? That's last minute." "I know, but it'll be good for her. Some family bonding time." She didn't argue, just nodded. "Be back for dinner?" I smiled. "Of course." By noon, I was driving April north with my parents. April sat in the back seat with earbuds in, humming softly to some pop song I couldn't name. She was bright, cheerful, utterly unaware of the chaos swirling beneath the surface of her perfect little world. When we arrived at the modest farmhouse where Beatrice lived, my mother gave April a brief rundown. "This is a friend of the family," she said kindly. "She's been very sick, and she just wants to meet some of our next generation before she passes." April, ever sweet, smiled and nodded. She had no reason to suspect anything more. Beatrice opened the door herself, thin, frail, but with sharp, intelligent eyes that hadn't dulled with illness. She took one look at April and gasped. "She looks just like him," she whispered. April offered a handshake, then a shy hug. The older woman's hands trembled as she embraced her. My father and I stood quietly to the side while they spoke. Beatrice didn't say anything revealing. She kept things simple, asking about school, hobbies, favorite foods. When April mentioned she wanted to study art or forensic science, Beatrice smiled. "Smart and creative," she said softly. "Just like your grandfather." She caught herself. April didn't notice the slip. The visit lasted just over an hour. Beatrice didn't have the strength for more. As we left, she pressed an envelope into my hand. "For when the time is right," she murmured. On the drive back, my phone buzzed twice. Once from Cheryl, once from David. I waited until we dropped April off at my mother's house before checking them. Cheryl's message read, "She was there again. Same car, same routine. Cameras are in place." David's message, "Audio got better this time. You'll want to hear it." I drove straight to the office and locked myself in. Cheryl was already there, waiting with a thumb drive. Her expression was tense. "She said his name this time," she said quietly. "No more guessing." I plugged in the drive and fast-forwarded through the footage. At one point, Grace's voice cut through clearly. They were in Luke's living room, wine glasses clinking, low jazz in the background. "I keep thinking he knows," she said. "The way he looks at me lately, it's like he's waiting for the right moment to snap." Luke chuckled. He suspects everyone. That's just who he is. It's why he's so good at what he does. Still, Grace murmured, maybe it's time. I can't keep living like this. The secrets are starting to rot everything. I watched her sip wine, lean into Luke's shoulder like they'd done it 1,000 times. Her eyes were soft, familiar. The same expression I used to see when we were newly married. It was gone now. I was no longer the one who gave her that look. She told him, I said aloud. Cheryl nodded. And there's more. Later that night, well, listen. She skipped forward. Another clip. Another room. The camera was positioned near a window with audio from a small directional mic. Grace's voice again, softer now. If April ever finds out, she won't, Luke interrupted. We've been careful. You've done your part. Still, what if Ed gets a DNA test? What if... He won't. He's too proud. He'd rather bury the suspicion than confront it. I paused the recording. My hands were steady, but my pulse was a hammer in my ears. They'd planned it all. Years of secrets, coordinated and maintained like a game of chess. And I had been the king they were slowly cornering. Not anymore. I backed up the footage to 3 different cloud services and stored physical copies in separate locations. Cheryl and David helped set up a schedule. Every Thursday, I would travel while they documented Grace's movements, and I would start preparing for the inevitable. But this wasn't going to be just a divorce. No, I wasn't interested in quiet settlements or shared custody agreements. I was going to burn down the illusions brick by brick. That evening, I walked through the front door with a bouquet of flowers. Grace raised an eyebrow. What's this? Just because, I said, handing them over. You've been carrying a lot lately. I appreciate you. She looked skeptical, but she played along. We had dinner as a family, laughed, told stories. Amy shared a dumb joke that made April snort soda through her nose. Grace watched me through it all, eyes wary. She knew something had shifted. Later, as we got ready for bed, she leaned in. Her tone was soft, dangerous. You've been very thoughtful lately. Is that bad? Number just surprising. I kissed her cheek. I'm just trying to be the man you deserve. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. I could see the question swirling beneath the surface. Good. Let her wonder. Because while she was busy doubting my behavior, I would be preparing my next move. Monday morning, I walked into the DA's office under the pretense of delivering contract paperwork. Luke wasn't in yet, but his assistant greeted me warmly. I left the documents and slipped a small device behind a decorative frame on his bookshelf. It was synced to my phone, designed to pick up encrypted text and call data from nearby devices. A week later, it paid off. Luke messaged Grace mid-afternoon. He's pulling back. You think he's planning something? Grace. Definitely, he's too calm. He's watching me, I can feel it. Luke. Then it's time. File first, take the narrative. Say he's emotionally abusive. Grace. He's smart, Luke. He'll twist it around. Luke. Then we make sure he doesn't get the chance. I stared at that screen for a long time, not with fear, but clarity. They weren't just unfaithful, they were strategizing how to destroy me. And that was the moment I decided to do something I had never done before. Not manipulate, not intimidate, not record. I decided to truly fight back, not in the courtroom, not in silence, but in public. The kind of exposure that couldn't be undone, the kind that wouldn't just ruin reputations, but permanently rewrite the story they were trying to write about me. And if they wanted a war, they were about to find out just how much of me they had underestimated. The next few days were a blur of carefully orchestrated silence. I smiled more, slept better, told jokes at dinner. Grace couldn't keep up with the shift, and that was the point. She began watching me more closely than I watched her. Every kind word I offered, every small act of affection, added to her paranoia. She didn't know I had already transferred ownership of our home to a family trust under my parents' name, filed a quiet motion to amend my will, and contacted 3 of the most ruthless divorce attorneys in the state, under aliases. Everything she believed was solid under her feet was now paper thin. David handed me the final piece of the puzzle that Wednesday. He had gone through years of Luke's communications, carefully, legally, and what he found was staggering. Luke had done this before. Not just one affair, but three, all with women whose husbands were in positions of influence. The pattern was sickening. Charm, manipulate, gain control, then pressure them into filing first and shaping the narrative to their benefit. Grace wasn't just disloyal, she was a pawn, willingly or not. I sat in my office late into the night, audio clips playing through my earbuds, one after another. In one, Grace laughed softly. I used to look at him and see safety. Now I just see someone waiting to catch me in a lie. Luke replied, That's because he is. But even if he does, he won't do anything. He's too careful, too moral. They didn't understand that being careful wasn't weakness. It was strategy. They had mistaken my silence for submission. That miscalculation would cost them everything. By the end of the week, I invited Grace to lunch. Something casual. A little Italian spot we used to love, with a quiet back patio and ivy along the walls. She arrived dressed nicely. Makeup light, hair pinned up like she wanted to recapture the woman I once adored. We ordered wine, talked about nothing. I waited for her to drop her guard, and when she did, I leaned forward. I know, Grace. Her fork paused halfway to her mouth. Know what? I know everything. About Luke, about April, about the last 7 years of your life that you thought were invisible. The color drained from her face. She set the fork down carefully. You're being dramatic. I chuckled. Number you just thought I was blind. There's a difference. She stared at me for a long moment. Why now? Because I needed to be sure. And now I am. I pulled a manila envelope from my briefcase and slid it across the table. Inside were copies of screenshots, transcripts, and a paternity test. One that I had completed without her knowledge using a sample from April's toothbrush and my own. The result was clear. I was not April's biological father. She opened it, flipped through the pages, and said nothing. I'm not going to make a scene, Grace. I'm not going to raise my voice or call you names. I don't have to. Her eyes welled with tears. Please. I'm going to give you a choice, I said quietly. You file for divorce, you walk away with a fair share. No custody battle, no public scandal. She whispered, What if I don't? Then I release everything. Luke's prior affairs, his texts, his voice recordings, every single message and plan you two concocted. I've already sent a copy to the ethics committee with his name redacted. But I'll remove that protection if you force my hand. Grace leaned back, the air knocked out of her. Her eyes darted to the envelope, then back to me. You'd destroy both of us? I didn't smile. No, Grace, I'd be saving myself. She looked away, eyes fixed on the ivy-covered wall. For the first time, she looked smaller than I remembered. Not because she had been caught, but because she had been reduced to the reality of what she'd become. You used to love me, she whispered. I still do, but love isn't loyalty. You taught me that. She didn't answer. She just folded the papers neatly and placed them back in the envelope. When the check came, she didn't fight me for it. She didn't even look up when I walked away. The next morning, she filed. The house felt different once she moved out. Quieter, lighter. April chose to stay with me not because I told her anything, but because Grace didn't fight for her. It broke my heart in a way I didn't expect. April wasn't to blame for any of this. She was a bright, kind-hearted girl who thought her world was stable. And now the ground beneath her had shifted without warning. I sat her down that weekend, just the two of us. I need to tell you something, I said gently. Her eyes filled with worry. Is Mom okay? She's fine, I assured her. But you need to know that things between your mother and me, they weren't honest. For a long time. April bit her lip. You're getting divorced? I nodded. Yes. Did you do something? No, I said softly. But your mother did. And while I'll always care about her, I can't live a life based on lies. I owe myself more than that. And I owe you the truth. She looked away, trying to be strong. Is it because of Luke? I froze. How do you know about him? She shrugged. I'm not dumb, Dad. I've seen things, heard things. You think kids don't notice, but we do. I took her hand. You're not at fault. Not for any of this. She nodded slowly. I know, I just don't want to lose you. You never will. It was a long road after that. Divorce papers were finalized quietly. Luke was removed from several cases due to personal misconduct, and though he kept his job for a while, his influence slipped. Eventually, the whispers turned into inquiries, and the inquiries into formal investigations. Grace didn't fight me in court. She didn't show up for several hearings. I think she knew she'd already lost everything that mattered. As for me, I rebuilt. I started with the truth. I told my parents everything. I told my siblings. I even told Amy when she was old enough to understand. I didn't want secrets to define our family anymore. Years passed. The pain faded, though it never truly disappeared. But with time came clarity. Grace had been part of my story, but not the whole story. She had betrayed me. But she had also taught me to protect myself, to know my worth, and to never again ignore the voice in my head that told me something was wrong. Now, when people ask me if I'd ever marry again, I smile. Not because I've closed my heart, but because I've learned that love, real love, isn't about appearances. It's about truth. And no matter how long it takes, truth always finds a way to rise. Years passed, and the pain that once felt unbearable slowly faded into something manageable, something I learned to live with. April grew up surrounded by love, guided by truth and strength. She never questioned who her real father was because she saw it in the way I stood by her. Always. I never heard from Grace again. Last I knew, she'd moved out of state with Luke, both of them trying to build a life from the ruins they created. But that wasn't my concern anymore. I had chosen peace, and every day since I've honored that choice. Some betrayals break you, others build you. Mine did both. But at the end, I walked away with what mattered most: my daughter, my dignity, and a future no longer defined by the lies of the past.